Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's video on 7 shows that jumped the shark. So in this video I will be talking about shows that I believed jumped the shark, and I will be telling when I believe these shows jumped the shark. So this of course is all just my opinion, as a lot of people may disagree with me that the show in particular did jump the shark, and some people may agree with me there, but will disagree on when it jumped the shark. So this of course is all just my opinion. Now first, let me get into what I mean by jump the shark. So, of course, this is a popular idiom that refers to an episode of Happy Days when the Fonz jumped the shark, and is noted to be when the show really started to go downhill. So we got a couple definitions I saw online. There's one from Dictionary Online that says jump the shark is when a TV series or movie reaches a point at which far-fetched events are included merely for the sake of novelty, indicative of a decline in quality. And Wikipedia refers to jumping the shark as jumping the shark is an idiom used to describe the moment of a misguided attempt at generating new publicity for something once but no longer widely popular. The attempt serves instead to highlight the irrelevance of what it intended to promote. So those two definitions, I think, don't really fit exactly every example of what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I think the best definition, is how I'm using the term for this video, comes from the Urban Dictionary, which defines jump the shark, the beginning of the end. Something is said to have jumped the shark when it has reached its peak and begun a downhill slide to mediocrity or oblivion. Which I think that definition fits. Even though the first two, there are definitely some examples of shows that already started to decline. They try something for publicity to try to rank up the ranks, and it ends up just defining how terrible the show is, and it goes beyond control. But not every show on my list that will apply to. I think it mainly applies to the moment that something really, really terrible happened that indicates that the show is no longer a great show, mind you, is no longer good, and from then on out the show really just gets even worse and declines, leading to a terrible ending. Now, before I get into what I believe are the shows that did jump the shark, I want to talk real quick about some shows I think are not eligible for this list that did not jump the shark. First of all is Westworld. A lot of fans and audience will tell you that the show jumped the shark or it's getting worse. Well, I actually very strongly disagree. In fact, I would call this an opposite situation, almost a growing the beard situation. Apparently, some people are trying to make that into the opposite idiom. Refers to Star Trek Next Generation, when Commander Riker grew his beard and the show got better. Like, it started out terrible, but it got better. So it's like the reverse jumping the shark. And that's what I think Westworld applies, because I honestly think Season 3 is one of the best seasons ever made, and Season 1 is really overrated and just mediocre. But that's just me. That's my opinion. I know it's not a popular one, but that's how I really strongly feel. So definitely you'll not see Westworld on this list. There were 2 shows that I considered for this list, but ultimately decided that they did not jump the shark, and that is Battlestar Galactica and Mr. Robot. Now, in both cases, I wasn't that happy with the ending, mainly because I felt it was disappointing. Like, it wasn't indicative of the strong quality of storytelling that previous seasons portrayed. But in both cases, the ending weren't like outright terrible. And even though there are some moments in both shows that I could point to, I don't think that the show overall just dropped in quality. I think the high quality was definitely more inconsistent in the final seasons of both shows, but there were still some good things about it. So I ultimately decided that both those shows did not jump the shark. So Now let me get into 7 shows that I did believe jumped the shark. These are shows, of course, that I had liked at one point. And I'm sort of going to go through these 7 shows in order of the least egregious offense of jumping the shark and the most egregious offense. And what I mean by that is, if the show wasn't all that high quality to begin with, then that's sort of least offense. But if it was really, really high quality, and then all of a sudden the moment hit, and then it got decreasingly worse to terrible, that would be a more egregious offense. Anyway, let me start with Orphan Black, which is a show that I never thought was that great of a show, but I really did enjoy season 1. Season 2 less so. Season 3 I thought was terrible, but then season 4 I actually thought was amazing and a great show. But then season 5 sucked and it really went downhill. So I did think it was worth mentioning Orphan Black, even though this was never one of my favorite shows. And the moment I believe Orphan Black jumped the shark was killing off MK from season 5, episode 2. So, as I said, I loved season 4, and I think season 5 really started to go downhill and just get worse and worse. And I think this is the moment where I realized that the show had lost its quality and was going to be no good, because it was an absolute terrible moment. Now, MK was one of the clones of the main character of the show. How the show was about, a whole bunch of clones, and she was introduced in season 4, and she's part of what made season 4 great. She brought something new and fresh to the show because she was like a hacker who's like really paranoid, and I thought she had a really long, interesting story arc ahead of her, but instead they killed her off in a very sort of disrespectful way, where her death was like meaningless, where she was killed off by this stupid bad guy for no good reason, and they really like disregarded this character and didn't care about her. And instead they went in a different direction that involved like monsters in the woods and over the top ham acting, going, Mr. Westmoreland, villain, and he twirled his mustache. It was terrible. Like, so they could have took this really interesting, really great character and went into a more interesting direction, but they 86 that killed her off immediately for no good reason, so they could go in this terrible direction where the show just really declined in quality and was not interesting after that. So that was definitely a jumping the shark moment for that show. So the next show I want to talk about that jumped the shark is 13 Reasons Why. Now, I know not everyone loved this show, but I really loved season 1. I think season 1 was one of the best seasons of television I've seen. I mean, it did dip in quality in the middle, but the ending was so powerful. It really resonated with me. It was like a show I really connect with. I know there's some people out there that believe that it endorses suicide or whatever, and those people are objectively wrong. What else can I say about that? But here's the thing about 13 Reasons Why is that I believe the show should have just been one season. Now, if they wanted it to be more than one season, they should have done a mythology type format like Fargo, what have you, where every season's about a different group of characters. But that's not the direction they went. They decided to bring these characters back for a second season. Now, at first I was okay with it until we got into the jumping the shark moment that made me realize that this format was not working. And that is the moment when they revealed that Hannah had a summer fling with Zach. From season 2, episode 6. Now, Hannah was the main character who had committed suicide at the start of the show, which the whole show was about. And this revealing that she had this fling with this character that previously she was shown to have little to no relationship with whatsoever. And it actively contradicts how he was portrayed in season 1. But more than that, it really undermines the whole premise of the show, which is her relationship to Clay, which was the strength of season 1, and this came out of nowhere and really muddled things up. It was very clear, and I think this fits the definition of jumping the shark, where the showrunners were out of ideas and were trying to just do something shocking in order to get those ratings back, and it really reeks of bad writing, and this show definitely went downhill after that season. That's when I realized that season 2 was not going to pull together, because I thought maybe they could make season 2 work, but it only got worse from here. Season 2 was a disaster. I didn't even bother with seasons 3 and 4, which I heard from those who watched it were even worse. That completely lost all quality whatsoever. So yes, that is definitely the jumping the shark moment for 13 Reasons Why. So, next show that jumped the shark is Dexter. Now, this won't come as a surprise to most people. In fact, I don't really know I've ever seen anyone who doesn't think Dexter jumped the shark, because it definitely is pretty agreed upon that the later seasons of Dexter are worse. Now, when exactly it jumped the shark is a point of disagreement, because I know most people will say only watch up to season 4. And I actually disagree with that, because I liked season 5. So I would actually put the jumping the shark moment a bit later. In fact, I know of some people who said that the jumping the shark moment in Dexter was the finale of season 4, which I very strongly disagree with, because I actually think that is the best episode of the entire season. And the moment they're referring to, I thought was, even though it did have kind of negative implications for the show going forward, it was the most powerful moment of the show, and one of the most powerful moments in television history. So I would not change anything differently. That is definitely not a jumping the shark moment. I would put the jumping the shark moment a bit later in season 6. As I said, love season 5, but season 6 I think is easily the worst season of the show. So the moment I picked for the moment Dexter jumped the shark is the reveal that the villain is just a delusion inside his sidekick's head from season 6, episode 9. Now, they had introduced this huge, villain played by Edward James Olmos, who was like this priest who would go around killing people because they're sinners, whatever, and he was shown as a really demented, evil man. And he had this, like, church choir type sidekick who was very sort of easily naived and tricked, and you could see that he wasn't really okay with what the priest guy was doing sometimes. But it's revealed that the priest guy, the Edward James Olmos, is a huge villain. Just a delusion inside Trevor's head. He's the real killer, because the priest guy actually died years ago. He was just a delusion that Trevor made up to justify, and it was like schizophrenic, whatever. And that's a very tired trope. I mean, sometimes it's used very well in certain movies and shows, which I don't want to mention for spoiler reason, but you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, it's very clear that. But that trope needs to be used properly if you're going to use it. And this is a very inappropriate, nonsensical, just obvious jipe of trying to, look at this. And that's why I pinpointed as the jumping the shark moment. Even though it comes a bit later in season 6, it's episode 9, where I think none of season 6 is good. I think this show already started sucking at this point. But this is the one moment I would pinpoint that really indicates that the show was no good. I guess this fits more of the other definitions of jumping the shark, where a show in decline tries some publicity stunt to try to say, look how much better we are, and try to attract more people, but it ends up actually just proving how irrelevant and mediocre the show has become. Has the show actually doesn't get any better. Now, granted, season 7 was slightly better than season 6, but it's still never fully recovered, and season 8 was just a total disaster. The ending of the show was just a travesty. So yes, that is when Dexter jumped the shark. So, the next show I want to get to that I believe jumped the shark is The Walking Dead. Now, I actually covered this episode on my channel when it aired, and I was yelling and screaming and throwing out all sorts of curse words. In fact, when I first watched the show, my first reaction was to jump up and throw things and be like, what the fuck? And so for The Walking Dead, I think this is probably a show most people that has the most people who think it didn't jump the shark, who actually did stick with it to the end, which I I think the majority, though, agrees that the show definitely got worse. I have heard some people saying that they stopped watching after like season 2 or season 3. I stuck with it a bit more than that, as I kind of liked season 4 and 5, particularly 5. I thought was quite strong. It's probably my favorite of the show, and so I was digging season 6. Until we got into this episode. So, my moment for when The Walking Dead jumped the shark is Negan kills the cameraman from season 6, episode 16. Now, this refers to the ending reveal of the finale. Now, this finale I was already having issues with because it was being completely inconsistent with this portrayal of the saviors who were the big bad guys. And they were obviously just doing this for plot convenience. They didn't care about having any level of consistency. The saviors were all of a sudden had unlimited amount of people, and they had omniscient, like God powers that allowed them to pop up wherever the plot required, which really annoyed me. But you know what? I would be willing to forgive that. I'd be willing to let this go if it wasn't for the biggest offense, the tragedy that I referred to as the jumping the shark moment, when Negan gathers all the main characters up, Rick and all the characters we like, and he says that he's going to kill one of them, beating them to death with his baseball bat that's covered in barbed wire, Lucia, whatever. Ooh, isn't that cool? I named his baseball bat. Who cares? But anyway, he says he's going to beat them to death with it. And so he does. But in this episode, we see it from a POV shot of the intended victim, not knowing who that victim is. In fact, the POV shot was done purposely so we wouldn't know who it was that he killed, and it cuts to black, so we're supposed to be all in pins and needles finding, oh my god, who did Negan kill? In fact, I remember over the summer, whenever anyone brought it up or asked, oh, who do you think he killed? My answer was always like, I don't care, because this is an obvious publicity stunt done in order to generate buzz, in order to generate internet buzz. It's the biggest example, I think, that fits that definition of jumping the shark, as a publicity stunt that is meant to attract more people, but only just indicates how irrelevant the show has become. Because if, as I said, I was digging this episode, and I could have liked it if they simply showed who Negan killed. I think that would be good storytelling. If they simply just showed who Negan killed, and so then the next season we can be like, oh my god, what's going to happen now? How are they going to deal with the saviors? I actually would have been okay with all the flaws of the saviors having omniscient powers and whatnot if they just simply showed it. And when they did reveal in the next season who it was he killed, it was the same two characters who died from the comics, and everyone, board or anyone was able to predict. It was the most predictable thing ever, so why make it a mystery? Why not just show us in that episode? I think, and not only that, but the POV shot itself was like bad cinematography. It was like all of a sudden I was watching Jackass or something. It was really out of place. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen, and the show definitely declined after that. Like, I think I watched season 7 and season 8, but just very casually. I stopped reviewing it on my channel, and I was just hate watching it, mainly, for the most part. And after season 8, I was like, I've had enough. This show's clearly died the moment they had that moment where Negan killed the cameraman, and I'd just been watching a dead corpse, Walking Dead, get it? Since then, so I just gave up on it after season 8 altogether, and stopped hate watching it, and stopped watching it altogether. So to me, that is a very clear moment when The Walking Dead jumped the shark. So, getting into the next show, I believe jumped the shark, which is, I think, a very clear example, is the show Fringe. Now, I will tell anyone who doesn't know about the show to watch this show. That was a great show. It had amazing acting in it. But I also tell them to only watch the first 3 seasons. Do not bother with season 4 and season 5. And even though season 5 wasn't that horrendous, it kind of just lost it. It lost its touch. Season 4 was horrendous. And so we get to my jumping the shark moment. There's a moment where Fringe jumped the shark. is when Peter Bishop is erased from existence from Season 3, Episode 22. Now, this is the finale of Season 3, which they had this whole arc started in Season 2 about this huge war between parallel universes, and it was resolved at the end of Season 3, which I'm fine with. Like, they couldn't stretch out the story arc forever. You can resolve it, move on to different things, but instead what they did was erase the main character from existence, therefore changing the entire timeline. So the first 3 seasons we watched didn't exist anymore. So Season 4 was like a parallel universe that retreaded different events that we've already seen from a different version because they erased the timeline. And then Season 5 like jumps way into the future with having the characters being frozen so they can appear in this future where the aliens are taking over the Earth, and it's an entirely different show. It is. So this is clearly the moment where the show stopped being the show, the great show that it was. It turned into a terrible show and then a mediocre one. But still, and here's the thing, because my sister pointed it out to me when this first happened, but I didn't agree then, because for me, I assumed that this would just be something they would undo in the very next episode, which I'd be fine with if they said, oh, Peter's erased from existence, but then they find some way to undo that and bring it back and restore the timeline. That's a Star Trek type thing. You always, if you alter the timeline, by the end of the episode, you find a way to restore it to its original existence. So that's what I assumed Fringe would do, because surely it wouldn't just have the rest of the show take place in an alternate timeline where all the events of the first 3 seasons we just watched didn't happen. Surely they wouldn't do that. But they fucking did. Therefore, this is clearly a jumping the shark moment. Definitely. Anyway, we'll get into the next show that I firmly believed jumped the shark, very firmly. And that is Lost. And again, you got your outliers out there who love the finale and love the final season. Good for them. But the majority of people agreed that the last few seasons of the show were terrible, particularly the last season, and that the show lost its magic. Now, again, a lot of people disagree on when this happened. I've heard a lot of people say that Season 3 was when it lost its edge. Some people say Season 4. I think that's way too early. For me, there's a very clear pinpoint in Season 5 where the show lost, jumped the shark. Now, it's funny because my sister mentioned on her videos before where she believed Lost jumped the shark, and I believe she mentioned that the episode where Daniel Faraday was killed off, and it kind of contradicted how they established time travel. Like they went against the whole thing about whatever happened, which was Daniel Faraday's whole mantra. So he was completely out of character, and they killed him off in a very pretentious way, which I do agree that was a terrible moment. However, I would pinpoint the moment that Lost jumped the shark a bit earlier than that. And so my moment of when I believe Lost jumped the shark was when Jack, Kate, Hurley, and Saeed time traveled back to 1977 for no reason. Because, I loved Season 1 and 2 of Lost. In fact, I think Season 2 was the best season. Season 3, it meandered in the middle, but it had such a strong ending, like one of the best endings of any season ever. So Season 3 was great. Season 4 was great, had some issues, felt a bit truncated and lost, but there was a writer's strike, so what are you going to do? Still pretty solid season. Season 5, the first 6 episodes, I loved to death. Like some people, I heard one video that said Lost jumped the shark when it time traveled, but that's very vague because you had some time travel episodes with Desmond, which are considered the best of the show. I think it was specifically talking about the time travel in Season 5, but that's still a bit vague. And plus, I actually think the time travel part, at least for the first 5 episodes, really worked. In season 5 of Lost. But at the end of episode 6, when the Oceanic Six, those who had left the island, go to return to the island for various reasons, the plane for no reason time travels, and most people, like, Petas and Ben and Son and all the other passengers, they just stay on the plane. They just time travel for like a couple days in the future, so it doesn't even make a difference whatsoever. And then they land on the island. But Jack, Kate, Hurley, and Saeed, for no reason whatsoever, time travel to 1977, which just coincidentally is where all the other main characters, Sawyer, Juliet, and Jen, and all them are. Just happen to be there for no goddamn reason. Now, the show has done shit like this before. Granted, this isn't the first time they pulled the old, the island did it excuse. They did this back in season 3 when Locke, Desmond, and Mr. Echo are in the hatch while it implodes, and all of a sudden they're just fine outside the hatch, and for no reason they just say, the island did it. And there's many other examples where they said, the island did it, which is just a bullshit excuse for plot convenience. But this by far I think is the worst example. It clearly makes, even the stuff with Locke and Desmond appearing fine, I was willing to go with it. Fine, the island moved them out of the hatch so they wouldn't die in fire, whatever. But for them to just have these 5 characters just magically travel back in time to the point where the other main characters just so happen to be, that's too much. That is way too much. And also it indicates the point of decline in the show, which is also the main reason why I point this out as the jumping the shark moment, is because this is clearly the moment where the show started getting worse. The show was amazing, it was great, it had its flaws, but it was mostly amazing overall up until this episode. And after this episode, next one's fine, but mostly after this episode, it just started getting worse and worse and worse and worse until we get until season 6, which was absolutely terrible, and the writers clearly didn't know how to end this thing or resolve any of the storylines that the audience actually cared about. And so once they traveled back in 1977, it was just boring. They really botched the story and made it uninteresting, and more than that, it just makes no fucking sense. It makes no sense. Anyway, so that is my jumping the shark moment for Lost. So, the final show I'll get to, which I believe has the most egregious example of jumping the shark, and if you're familiar with my channel, it's come as no shock to you, Game of Thrones. Now, again, I know there's a group in the minority, definitely in the minority. You can be in denial about the fact you're in the minority, but you are. Nothing wrong with that. Welcome to your opinion. The minority opinion that the Game of Thrones was good up until the end, and that there was nothing wrong with the finale. But I actually think if you feel like the final season of the show was written well and was not completely rushed and maintained the quality of the earlier seasons, you're objectively wrong. There's been, anyone who knows anything about writing, there's been detailed, deep essays about analyzing just exactly how poorly written this final season was. But again, this is yet another example where people disagree on when the show jumped the shark. In fact, what inspired me to make this whole video was I watched this video where they were saying where Game of Thrones jumped the shark, and someone said season 5, another one said a point in season 4, which I think is way too early. In fact, most people will say only the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones were good, which I disagree with. I think Game of Thrones was amazing right up until season 6. In fact, it was amazing right up until the moment before this episode I'm about to get into. Because, season 5 had its flaws, the sand snakes and whatnot, and season 6 had its flaws too, like Arya regenerating magically. But it was still great. Two of the best episodes of the entire show are in season 6. So I would vehemently disagree with anyone who said this show jumped the shark any point before season 7. And also, I disagree very strongly with those who said the show jumped the shark in season 8, because clearly it was season 7. So my point, where Game of Thrones jumped the shark, was Tyrion's plan in season 7, episode 5. Now, those familiar with my channel may have expected me to say the whole white dragon bringing down the wall with blue fire has the jumping the shark moment. And believe me, I did consider that moment, because when I first saw that, I reacted very poorly. I started screaming and yelling about how they're turning into a silly cartoon. It's a fucking cartoon. And granted, but the decline actually started to happen before that, and that was in season 7, episode 5. And as I said, I actually thought the first 4 episodes of season 7, while not perfect, were still really good and still maintain that high quality that the first 6 seasons had, and that had they did the end of season 7 differently, it could have been a great season. But season 7, episode 5 is when it became clear. It's when there was a drastic, noticeable change to anyone who knows about writing or storytelling, from great character-based, thought-out, complicated, very intellectual type of storytelling, to fast-paced, no character-based, everyone acting out of character. Let's just get the plot going, where things happened that were illogical, that didn't make any sense, that were completely out of character for everyone, simply because they wanted these plot points to happen. And so the rest of the show read like an outline, basically, which is ironic, because they were pretty much going off of an outline, because the books weren't written yet. And that's how the rest of the show from this episode onwards feels like. It feels like an outline of just plot points happening with no designated rhyme or reason, and a completely out of character. And all started here with Tyrion's plan. So what was Tyrion's plan? Well, Tyrion's brilliant plan was to go beyond the wall and capture a white, to bring it back down to King's Landing, and to show Cersei so they can prove that the White Walkers are a threat. Now, this plan is so dumb on so many levels. And Tyrion, mind you, was the smartest character in the entire show. He was actually one of the most smartest, most intelligent, witty characters in television, period. Season 2 was built off of how witty and awesome he was. And now he's proposing the most stupid and idiotic plan that actually does end up screwing everyone, because of this plan, to go beyond the wall and capture White, to show it to Cersei. And they do this, they activate this plan, and of course Cersei betrays them anyway, because of course she does. She's Cersei, like he doesn't even know his own damn sister. Really, what they should have just done is gone to King's Landing, used the dragons to kill Cersei and take it over. Boom, problem solved. Then they can deal with the White Walker threat. All done with. They don't have to worry about Cersei. They don't need to send a group of people beyond the wall, because what happened was they got trapped there, and Daenerys had to travel with her dragons to save them, and that allowed the Night King to kill one of those dragons and turn it into a white, and so that allowed him to bring down the wall. So the whole reason why the White Walker invaded Westeros, and the whole reason why they became a huge threat, was because of this plan. It was their own fault. It was Tyrion's fault. It was Jon Snow's fault. It was Daenerys' fault. It was all their faults. Because they all acted like idiots, they screwed everyone. I mean, Tyrion didn't even know his own goddamn sister. So they turned everyone into morons. This plan made zero sense. It was completely out of character. And from this point on, barring maybe the first 2 episodes of season 8, which were decent, but other than that, this point on, every episode of the show was just a bunch of nonsense plot points that had none of the thought out, dynamic, great writing aspects of strong character stories, and thinking things happening because it made sense. It was a character-driven story because it made sense for the characters, it made sense for the world, where here they totally disregarded all logic. People were traveling back and forth at speeds that were completely illogical, and things were just happening just because some plot outline required it to, not because it made any sense for the characters or any sense for the story. And it all started here with Tyrion's dumbass plan. Anyway, so that's it for my 7 examples of shows that jump the shark and when they jump the shark. Thanks so much for watching, and I think I do need to reiterate, of course, this is all just my opinion, as I said. Anyway, if you did enjoy this video, be sure to check out my channel as I cover many other shows. I cover Star Trek Discovery, I cover all things Star Trek, and The Expanse, which is coming out with a new season coming up this week. Notice how that show wasn't on this list because it has not jumped the shark. But anyway, can't wait for that. And I also cover some retro shows, such as some reviews on Breaking Bad and The Outer Limits, the 1990s version. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.